Musical Talk, the UK independent musical theatre podcast.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode of Musical Talk. My name is Nick Hutson, and I was going through the archive recently and I discovered a conversation that I had with Thos Ribbits about girls in musicals, because it was at the time when Calnedar Girls was opening, and now Calnedar Girls is back on tour. I thought, as we never released this discussion, I thought it'd be a good time to play it to you. Speaking of girls and beautiful girls, I know, a bit of a tenuous link, we're going to be having a review of Old Friends, which is playing at the Gielgud Theatre, the Stephen Sondheim tribute concert. So a lovely varied episode. Let's start with that review, and I'll speak to you after that. We are here at Old Friends, which is one of those kind of greatest hits of Sondheim shows, which we've seen many before, but this is the first one since
This is the first one not in a theatre above a pub with three people and a Casio keyboard since in about 20 years.
Yeah, the first one since the passing of Stephen Sondheim. Does it have a... I'm here with Andrew. Hello, Andrew. Does it have a
Hello, Nick.
certain difference to you now that Sondheim is no longer with us?
I don't think it has a certain difference. It's got a certain budget. I mean, this is kind of ultra deluxe, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is... I mean, we were talking slightly about... I'm struggling with the song selection or the song order, but it's almost like they bunch a group of songs together from a show, generally. So you have these almost miniature staged moments. Yeah, so you're kind of seeing like not just the greatest hits, but you're almost seeing like mini versions of the shows.
What could be.
Yeah, of what could be, and your mind kind of then fills in the gap, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In the sense of, okay, well, I feel like I've seen like 6 or 7. I feel like I've seen Into the Woods and Sweeney and what this would look like as a full production.
We will say that we do have an excellent cast in this, and mostly Bernadette Peters and
Yes.
Leah Salonga, not sure which one, forgive us. And after the wonderful Sweeney Todd section, which is probably my favourite Sondheim musical.
And Bonnie Langford. Dame Bonnie Langford.
And Gavin Lee and Jack Yarrow and many, many, many others. I want Leah Salonga to be Mrs. Lovett in Sweeney Todd, because she was excellent, wasn't she?
And because you've seen her in costume. It's kind of
doing an accent.
Doing the accent very well, and it does. It leaves you would like to see more. You kind of think, I could watch any of these as full productions.
This was on television as a one-off concert over the Christmas period last year, and it's been trimmed, I think, rightly so. First act is zoomed past, but it ended with Sunday, which I thought was rather strange, because I believe the original version of this show ended with that completely. So it'd be interesting to see what's changed in Act 2. This is a Cameron McIntosh devised piece, mostly of the shows that he himself proudly announced that he brought to London to make hits. I was nearly welling up at the end of Act 1, just because I really do miss Sondheim, and this does hit harder, this production, since his passing. That's why I asked you, Andrew. Do you think the songs work out of context?
Yeah, but that's why there's so many Sondheim review shows.
I must say, I'm appreciating the commentary from the people behind us telling us what every song is and
it's
where
very
it comes
exciting.
from.
It's like, oh yes, this one's Send Me the Clowns. And then when Lady to Lunch came on, it's like, oh yes, I've seen this one. Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I mean, it's a very, as you said, it's very, very lavish production. The orchestra is excellent, and we're getting little sets come on and projections and things. It's not just everyone's wearing cocktail dresses and singing the song.
Costumes, like people have got costumes, makeup, wigs.
Yeah,
it's really kind of, it feels no expense spared.
Yeah,
so it doesn't feel like they've cut corners or.
What songs are there that you're hoping for in Act 2, which I'm sure you'll get?
We notably haven't had any Follies yet, have we? So I'm presuming we're getting Follies.
Don't lose your mind. Was that company? I get confused between the two.
I don't think we've had any Follies in that one.
I'm sure we'll have Broadway Baby as the ending, perhaps.
Maybe, but then I thought they'd have ended Act 1 on A Little Priest. That's why I thought
That's
that was
why I was expecting it to end.
Yeah, and then it's like, then we're going to put Ladies Who Lunch on
in the interval.
Well, that would have made sense. And it's like sticking on Sunday. Like, well, okay, this is all good. It's not criticism. It's just like, okay, I don't quite get what you're
Some criticisms I've heard of the piece is that it doesn't introduce any of the songs. It doesn't show what show they're from. It just kind of goes bang, 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 bang.
But the purpose of this show, this is not an introductory show. It's not.
It's a farewell show, isn't it?
It's a farewell show. It is. It's exactly that. It's almost like it's almost every night is like a memorial service. I'm being
Wouldn't put that on the marquee.
No, but I'm being serious. Like if somebody
It's a celebration.
Yeah, it's a celebration. So if you didn't know who Sondheim was, you hadn't seen the shows, you're going to sit here. Yes, you would enjoy it. Of course you would.
They're good songs.
But you're going to be like, well, what's the context for this? I think this kind of assumes a familiarity with the material that you don't need the context.
We have a book that
make
we've been
sense?
given. We have a lovely book, a brochure.
I mean, what's interesting, you kind of think, well, there's several people, well, Bernadette in particular, who had a professional relationship, a working relationship with him. And they start off, there's references to Steve. Hello, Steve. But then actually they don't mention him again. No. I don't know if they mentioned him in Act 2. I didn't watch the TV version.
Would you? I mean, I would have liked when I did Into the Woods. I was half expecting it to come on and do the Witch song, the Witch rap, which is most known for.
I don't know. She's not going to do it in Act 2. We don't know. We haven't
Possibly.
looked at. We haven't checked the brochure. We like a surprise.
But they did the opening for Into the Woods, in which that song appears. So maybe they will. Maybe there'll be a very long curtain call. But I'm really, really enjoying it. It's flying by a lot quicker than I thought it would. The bells are ringing.
For me and my gal.
So we're probably going to have to go back to our seats, but we'll share more thoughts after Act 2. But very, very much enjoying Old Friends here at the Gielgud Theatre. Well, Act 2 has ended of Old Friends, standing here in the beautiful rain.
And there's no Act 3.
There's no Act 3. I really enjoyed that. What I liked about it was that it wasn't a kind of self-congratulatory review. It was, they came on, sung their stuff, acted throughout the song, and took a bow at the end, and that was kind of it. It was so slick and so well done. I just thought it was excellent. I really can't praise it enough. It's the ultimate tribute Sondheim concert, I think.
Yes, they do mention him again at the end.
Yes,
he pops up.
We were reminded why we were there. And it's very moving, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was very well done. We're not going to spoil it too much, but yes, he does come up.
And Act 2, what are your highlights?
Well, there was nothing from Dick Tracy, was there? Well, they did the review song, didn't they? The boy from
Ipanema.
Yeah. Well, it's a spoof of the girl from
Wales.
Yeah. It's a spoof of that song, and that's.
That was Mary Rogers that wrote the music for that, I believe.
And you've got the gypsy stuff. I mean, let's talk about like every Coming Up Roses.
Yeah. By Leah Sonder.
That's an Act 1 closer, right? It's an Act 1 closer, which is close to the end of Act 2. But again, that's what works very well. They take those little snippets, and actually you can see. I still felt like I could feel the context of that song, because it's not a nice song in terms of it. So she's doing something very unpleasant to her other daughter, and she manages to convey that in facial expressions, the looks, how she delivered it.
I mean, it also shows the strength that Sondheim wrote, that he was able to put all that into one song. And they say Sondheim doesn't work without context. It kind of does proving tonight, because I still forget a lot of these songs, and I'm reminded of them and thought, I know what's happening behind the emotion here. And, one does appreciate Sondheim as one gets older. That's certainly true.
We are middle-aged now.
We are middle-aged, and we appreciate...
Actually, when I first met you, was that a production of Sweeney Todd?
It was a concert production of Sweeney Todd.
Was it Maria Friedman?
It was Maria Friedman, but everyone knows Sweeney Todd, because it's his most...
Who was Sweeney? Bryn Terfel?
I think it was, Todd is different because it's his most commercial work, and it's about kind of... it's creepy and it's a bit camp and it's a bit fun. But notice there was nothing from Passion tonight.
That film.
Well, I don't mind the film if you look at it as a separate piece, but that's different.
Isn't Loving You from Passion?
Do you mean Leave You?
No, that's from Follies.
I don't remember Loving You. You're part of the phrase.
How rude, Nick. How dare you?
I remember Leaving You, but Excuse me. Just a wonderful, wonderful evening. The orchestra were brilliant. Slightly reduced, I think, from the television version.
But you know what? If you go further down, like we're not going to go past. Well, maybe we'll go past it. But if you go down the outside of the theatre, they do have the publicity photo of the TV special. Because we went to a show earlier this week where you had to sign a disclaimer saying that you knew that
well, to be fair, we went to a Darren Brown production this week.
But you had to sign a disclaimer saying you knew
Darren
Brown would not appear. And we were slightly saddened that we didn't have to kind of tick disclaimers like...
Sondheim will not appear.
No, more like... Julie Mackenzie will not be appearing in tonight's production. Please tick to confirm that you know this.
But the cast that did appear were excellent, but it's not about the cast.
We have to add, Julia Mackenzie was never scheduled to appear.
No, Julia Mackenzie was not.
You always have to tick Julia Mackenzie.
But it is not about the cast. This show is about...
Well, I mean, clearly, because only two of them actually say who they are, right? So it goes back to my earlier point. If you can't come in as a novice, right? This is not GCSE. This is A-level here. This is
General Certificate in Sondheim Education.
Maybe. Does GCSE still? I don't even know if it's still a thing. Maybe that's as I said, we're middle-aged. This is like PhD level. I don't know. It's like you've got to come in and you've got to know your stuff.
I think it's a good introduction.
It's not a good introduction. It's a good summary.
It's a good send-off.
I think I don't know.
I think Sweeney Todd is a good introductory to Sondheim, possibly then Into the Woods. Because I discovered Sweeney Todd when I was about 9 years old, and it just stuck with me. Yes. Some stuff I don't know. There was no...
you don't know Passion?
There was no Pacific Overtures. There was no Passion. But again,
there was Passion.
Was there? Well, there might have been Passion.
Isn't Loving You from Passion? Can we ask people?
I think...
This is what happens when you stand in a street and you're not Googling.
But Passion doesn't have a huge... hit. It's one of those weird shows.
There was nothing from the Frogs.
There was nothing
from the Frogs.
Do I Hear a Waltz? There was, all these Saturday Night, for example. But
nothing from that. Nothing from Assassins, was there?
No, that was a bit of a letdown, but it was a great...
What was Loving You from Assassins? I can't remember where it's from. No, what's the song?
There was no love letter.
The And I Feel Worthy of Your Love. That's Assassins, isn't it?
There was no love letter to Jodie Foster in this show.
No.
But
then that's also interesting. Is that related? Is that just related to things that Cameron produced?
I think so. I think they were just Cameron's shows that he obviously was very... I think this is Cameron's love letter to Sondheim. And lots of Cameron cast members in this show from his previous shows, like Gavin Lee from Mary Poppins, obviously Lea Salonga from Miss Saigon, Bernadette Peters from doing Sondheim here. And if you are a Sondheim fan, certainly go and see it. There's nothing new, there's nothing you haven't seen or heard before, but it's done very, very well, and it's a wonderful tribute to...
There's a song called Loving You, which may be from Passion, but...
I don't know, we'll look it up. But Andrew, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Nick.
And go and check out the show. Thank you so much.
Me and Andrew Keating talking there about old friends at the Gielgud Theatre. Certainly go and check it out if you are a Stephen Sondheim fan. My father's going to see it, and he isn't a Stephen Sondheim fan, so it might be worth getting him on to discuss what he thought of an entire evening of Sondheim's hits, generally out of context. But that's another episode to possibly look for in the future. Calnedar Girls, the musical, is now touring the Tim Firth and Gary Barlow production. As I said in the beginning, I thought it'd be interesting to dig this conversation out that Thos and I had about girls in musicals. So here is that discussion. It was recorded probably around 2017, I think, when it was about to open in the West End. So obviously it's 6 years old, so I'm sure the things we talk about are a bit out of date, but it's always worth kind of opening the time capsule. So let's do that. I'm here with Thos Ribbits. Hello, Thos Ribbits.
Hello, Nicholas Hutson. No, I've not finished being camp in my opening. Finished now.
I wish to know about your opening. The Girls is playing in the West End.
It is.
And really, really good show. Do go and see it. Thos, you want to talk to me about other musicals that reference girls, don't you? Or The Girls, or Les Girls, or...
Well,
whatever.
Pretty much that's exactly right, because funnily enough, when we were talking the other day about The Girls, the Calnedar Girls story, It's interesting because
I want musicals that mention calendars next week.
I'll have a think about that. But seriously, I read a review the other day about The Girls, and it was very, very positive. And you sent me an email saying, let's talk about The Girls. And each time I've had to remember, what's The Girls? Oh, it's the Calendar Girls. And I said in our conversation, I understand there may be a reason for it, I don't know, but Calendar Girls, the story on which it was originally based, has a certain cachet, a certain familiarity. A brand, yes, absolutely. And the show isn't doing that. It may or may not be a good idea, and it's not for me to comment, but it isn't that. But The Girls is quite generic at one level. And of course, it's also, on the other hand, very resonant of lots and lots and lots of songs and musicals. Which
that's why they call it The Girls.
Well, maybe, yeah. I mean, the first thing that came to my mind, of course, was the Sondheim song from Follies, which is Waiting Around for the Girls Upstairs. Weren't we knuckleheads then? I seem to remember as the second line.
Are you looking forward to Follies, by the way?
When it comes back?
Yes.
I'd love to see Follies again. I mean, you and I saw it years ago, didn't we?
Saw half of it.
A gala version that didn't quite have Elaine Stritch in it, but it's still a great show, though, isn't it?
Yes. It's a show I'd like to see again in my growing maturity in musical theatre knowledge, and it's a show I'd like to see because we didn't really see a version of it at all. We just saw half of the performers' legs at the London Palladium.
Oh, you mean from where we were sitting?
Yes, and Elaine Stritch didn't turn up. But I think with Imelda Staunton and Janie D, I think, is going into it.
That's very interesting. Is Imelda Staunton's going into that? Oh, my word, she's mopping up the musical scene at the moment, isn't she?
But she's becoming a new Sondheim girl.
Yeah.
Isn't she?
Well, yes, absolutely. She's in the same way that Julie Mackenzie was and is a Sondheim stalwart. You're right, Imelda Staunton, but she's a great actress, such a great actress. But there's that song, Waiting Around for the Girls Upstairs. I will just say, it's not necessarily on the subject of gender, but I do like that second line, weren't we knuckleheads then? To make that work, you have to use the word weren't with two syllables, which is weren't. And Sondheim's very good at making sure the scansion of a conversational tone.
Weren't's a good joke, was it?
Well, that's actually quite clever. Well done, you. Write that down for future reference. But seriously,
work on paper.
Weren't we knuckleheads then? Immediately, not only does it fit so beautifully along the melodic line and feels right conversationally, it also tells you much about the character singing it. Just by using weren't, you know what kind of American he is. And an Englishman could not sing that in the same way because we don't use weren't, we use weren't. It's a much brusquer terminology, but that's just the glory of Sondheim.
But isn't there a lyric, Beautiful Girls, or something like that in Follies as well?
Yes, there's a song called Beautiful Girls.
Yeah,
Here they come now, those beautiful girls, something like that. When I say something, not much, really. So that song immediately springs to mind. And then, if you start casting your mind around, just for more recent shows...
Your mind, Thos.
All right, casting your mind around. Well, I don't linger on the girls generally, but, think about Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
Linger?
Do you see... you saw Priscilla, Queen of the Desert?
No.
Did you not see it? Oh, my word, you missed a treat, I think. But there's a sequence, if you saw the film, or indeed if you saw the musical, where when they're going through the Australian outback, they are saved by a man who helps fix their vehicle, who turns out to have been a huge aficionado of lay girls, which in this case was a famous drag show.
They're not girls who work in the church, but aren't actually part of the religious...
As in L.A.Y., no. Also, nor is it an instruction. But they are...
The girls from Los Angeles.
But they're a drag act. They're a very, very famous drag act within this story. I genuinely don't know if there was something called Lay Girls. They may well have been, and this is just an ignorance. But it's that kind... he's reminiscing back to I assume they're the 60s, chaps who can carry off looking like women, singing and miming to songs like, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend and all that kind of stuff. It's a very sophisticated drag act of the period of the 60s when it was all about the glamour and you can't tell that they look like women, exactly like you get in La Cage aux Folles, in fact. The ability to pretend to be a woman is how good you are at it. and you have to reveal that you are not by lifting your wig up in La Cage aux Folles. So there's that version of Les Girls, which of course is just The Girls. And then, of course, there is a 1957 MGM musical, right at the tail end of the great MGM musicals. You know, to be honest, I know that you've discussed the history of musicals in cinema, and there's plenty of more meat on that bone, so I'm happy to have another conversation with you another day about that. But 1957, they're starting to go off the boil. But they did one called Les Girls, and they got Cole Porter to write the score. Now, poor old Cole Porter in 1957 was a very ill man indeed. He'd had his leg crushed. I don't know if he'd had it amputated by then, but this turned out to be his penultimate score. So he wrote 12 songs for the film.
Only 12.
Well, 12's enough for a 2-hour musical. But, and this is the sadness, they only used 5. So it's fun enough. People say, although it's technically a musical and it's made to look like a musical and it feels like an MGM musical, when you actually watch it, it's much more like a 2-hour filmed comedy with some songs in it. And indeed, I believe the director went on to say that's exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to make a comedy with songs in it rather than the musical, which is a
Sounds
real...
like La La Land set without the comedy.
Well, you and I are going to disagree on La La Land because I caught up with it the other day and I thought it was rather lovely. I don't think it's about comedy, but we'll talk about that another time perhaps. But Les Girls turns out to have... They're not Cole Porter's best songs, but you wonder what happened to the 7 songs that weren't used. There is one called You're Just Too Too. Well, it's a silly song. It's the Gene Kelly character.
I have to see that written to see what it means.
As in, you're just too much.
Right.
It's the story of Les Girls. It's quite interesting, actually. It's based on a written story, which was based on a semi-true experience. So it's about
Sounds like The Girls.
Well, it's about a stage act with Gene Kelly and a couple of girls, and one of them writes the story 20 years later when they've all broken up of what it was like, and libels one of the other girls who then countersues and gives her story. So the film is about them suing in a court, and rather splendidly, it's got a number of British guest stars in it. So Leslie Phillips is in it, Patrick Macnee is in it, John Steed from The Avengers, Kay Kendall is one of the women. She's a very, very great British actress who unfortunately died quite young. But so you see the person who wrote the original story's take of what happened, and then you see the person who sues her's take, and then Gene Kelly, as the fella in the act, comes along and gives his take. So in that sense, it's quite
like
clever.
3 acts or something.
It is. The unfortunate thing is that because they're all fabricating, none of the stories are at all the same. So it's not clever enough to do that thing whereby it intricately dissects each other's story. They are essentially 3 different stories about what happened. But pardon me. But it's essentially a comedy, and the song "You're Just Too Too," which I think is the best Cole Porter song in the piece, it's a throwaway comedy number, but it's a song that they sang when they were doing their act, and it's Gene Kelly and one of the girls singing, "You're just too charming, you're just too great, you're just too perfect, la 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 la," and the chorus is "You're just too too." It's very simple, very silly, but it's a good Cole Porter comedy number. So it's considered to be quite an interesting film. The reviews, both positive and negative. Some people are saying it's sad, but it's winding down, and Cole Porter would only go on to write one more score after this. Gene Kelly was never again a leading man after this. So it is that sense of the steam going out of the American film musical, unfortunately. On the other hand, I'm told by a lot of people, and certainly if you read the reviews online by just members of the public, the view seems to be that actually it's a film that you go into with relatively low expectations, but when you come out of it, you think it's actually very good. And what I now need to do is go off and remind myself about it, because it's been years and years since I've seen it.
Was it? I guess it was after High Society.
Yes, it was almost on the strength of High Society that this came into being, and they went to Cole Porter. So yes, if you like, High Society was the high watermark, and they were trying to a degree to replicate or at least relive some of it. It didn't quite work. But on the other hand, it's certainly not an absolute failure by any means. It's got that gorgeous 1950s colour as well, which, funnily enough, I think La La Land is very clever in using. There's a great suffused colour in that, because, as you know, La La Land spends most of its time pretending it's the 1950s, almost. Certainly the dresses and the way it's...
Spends a lot of time pretending to be a lot of things.
Oh, you... Anyway, as I say, a discussion for another day. But... so Les Girls is an interesting musical, and of course Les Girls, it's an odd bit of franglais, isn't it, because it's the girls, with a bit of French to make it sound exotic, but in fact
English.
Well, it is actually, isn't it? Yes. So we've already, just off the top of my head, there's the musical Les Girls, there's the drag act Les Girls from Priscilla, there's Waiting Around for the Girls Upstairs.
Jerry's Girls.
And yes, Jerry's Girls. Now, Jerry's Girls was an interesting thing. They've always said that Jerry Herman, this is a Jerry Herman review, of course, and I'm sure you know this. They always say that Jerry Herman is very good for writing very strong female roles. And it's absolutely true. Of course, you've got Hello, Dolly. You've got most of these shows are actually named after the female character that really leads the way. These are strong characters. He writes very well for women. He writes very well for men as well. I mean, let's not be snotty about.
I am what I am.
Yeah, I was going to say, which is not for women, but it's sung by a man who dresses as a woman, of course. But he writes these fantastic shows, often with a staircase. But who are the names you associate with Jerry Herman immediately? Angela Lansbury.
Carol Channing.
It's uncanny. It's like she's in the room, here hiding in a biscuit
You heard
tin.
the story about when she came third place in a Carol Channing lookalike contest.
Is that true? I always assumed that was one of those apocryphal stories.
I hope it's true, because it's a wonderful story. I mean, I remember when we were sat in this very room interviewing Jerry Herman. He wasn't here, but he was on the phone.
Episode 20 of Musical Talk, I think.
And he listed every single female actress that had played Dolly or Mame or whatever. And I remember you just going, mouthing to Tim, like, oh my goodness.
Yes. Well, because you do. I mean, forgive me, Jerry Herman, long may he survive, has written for some of the greats and helped some of those people become great. I mean, Angela Lansbury is a great actress anyway, and she would probably always have become a star, but it didn't hurt her at all that she was associated with Jerry Herman in his pomp. And so Jerry's Girls is a review of some of the greatest songs that he has written for strong female characters, and it says what it does what it says on the tin. It's a good, strong review for women. And then, of course, I've just thought of the Calnedar and Ebb show, which is not so well respected, but it's called 70 Girls 70. Are you aware of that?
No.
Well, fun enough.
I know 76 Trombones.
Which is a song by Meredith Willson and the Music Man.
Who's not a girl.
He's not, I've noticed. Although he does make reference to...
Sandy Wilson.
Well, he makes reference to Libertine Men and Scarlet Women in one of his songs, but that's not the point, I think, here. 70 Girls 70 is a very interesting... I think you'd have to call it unsuccessful Calnedar and Ebb show. Now, when we were talking about the girls in that previous episode, we made reference to the fact that, I think you made the point actually very nicely, that it's a great show for women of a certain age. And that's fine. That's sort of late middle age to early elderly, shall we say. 70 Girls 70 is in fact about a group of...
70 girls?
No, it's not 70 girls. It's girls who are 70.
That would be a big cast.
Yes, it would indeed, and far too expensive. In fact, it's actually about a group of superannuated burglars, villains.
Beg your pardon?
Old.
Right.
Superannuated. They're all septuagenarian men and women who, in the piece... it's one of those Calnedar and Ebb things where they are, of course, not. It's not quite what you're seeing. It's people performing. So you know exactly the way Cabaret does it through...
It's a concept piece.
Yes, it does it through the Weimar Republic songs, and Chicago tells its story through vaudeville. This is about a group of older people acting out the story, or so I understand it, of a burglary. I think they're stealing mink coats. But once again, it's called 70 Girls 70. The villains, funnily enough, are not all women. And I say villains, they're not villains. You know, they're the principal characters are elderly men and women, but that's a lovely show for old people.
Is it set in a retirement home or something like that?
Oh, now, I've never seen it, and it did come to London a few years ago. It was a few years ago now, and I think the lovely and now late and much lamented Dora Bryan was one of the 70 girls. As
it's now called a comedy about a bank robbery.
Well, that's a good show as well, but I don't think it's at all the same thing, and that's got a nastier edge to it. Although it's a comedy, it's got there's some proper unpleasantness in it.
I haven't seen it yet.
It's worth seeing, but it doesn't end nicely.
Okay.
So it's not laugh, laugh, laugh all the way through, but that's a sidestep. So 70 Girls 70 is a great show, and it's got, is it called... Oh, I can't remember his name, but the chap who was the voice of Peter Pan in the Disney cartoon version, Hans Conried, I think his name was, something like that, is also in the original cast recording of 70 Girls 70. The score is a beautiful score, as you expect from Calnedar and Ebb. It's a lovely score. The show I don't think was a success, and I don't think it has been a success in the times people have tried to revive it. I think it's been revised a few times as well as revived a few times. But some of the songs are absolutely lovely, and it's so nice hearing old men and women singing, and they're singing beautifully as well. I believe in the original cast, one of the actresses wasn't actually a singer per se. That's not what she was known for, but she has this beautiful, imperious singing voice, which I think is fantastic.
Was it Glynis Johns?
It was not Glynis Johns, although, obviously, forgive me, she gets her little night music moment, doesn't she? So,
Thos, as always, your knowledge of clapped
out old musicals, yes.
of old musicals is much appreciated.
Thank you. I'm
Not
sorry.
by me, of course, but by the listeners.
Well, as I say, it's one of those things that, you can just spend 5 minutes talking about each of the musicals. Obviously, you saw my train of thought derailed just outside the station. There are plenty of songs and musicals with the word girls in. Funnily enough, my mind was going on to the complete opposite, because in London, it's not a musical, but we have the Boys in the Band playing at the moment, which is a totally different gender, as you will appreciate.
Well, Thos, thank you very much.
A pleasure, as always.
A fascinating delve there into the Musical Talk archive, Time Machine. Also lovely to hear a reference to Glynis Johns, who recently celebrated her 100th birthday, an absolute legend. Thank you very much for joining me for this week's episode of Musical Talk. Next week, we shall be discussing The Time Traveller's Wife, which is a new musical opening this week in the West End. So we look forward to going to check that out. Until then, take care, have a lovely week, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Musical Talk. To find out more about the world of Musical Talk, you can visit our website at musicaltalk.co.uk, where you'll find all our episodes, or you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Musical Talk.